looking at the landscape of next year's college football season, I think right now there are 4 teams and 4 teams only we can call locks to make the college football playoff, where I can't see a scenario where come January, these 4 teams are not playing for a championship. There's only 4 locks. I'll give them to you right now. Team number 1, drum roll please. To no one's surprise, the Georgia Bulldogs. They're locked to make the playoff. They're going nowhere. Last year, should have been the playoff, lose 1 game. Now, if that happens again, they'll still be in. But boy, this team is loaded, and what's scary for the rest of the country is they have that chip back on their shoulder. You get Carson Beck back. You get a lot of guys on defense coming back now for this 2024 season. You had Kirby go into the transfer portal and get guys like Trevor Etienne, Travis's brother, came over from Florida now to replenish the running back room. This is an insanely talented team that, oh yeah, by the way, now has a chip on their shoulder after losing to Alabama in the SEC title game, after having their 29-game winning streak stopped by the same team where the streak started by losing to Alabama in the SEC title game 2 years prior and missing the playoff. Kirby now, who already talked about it after they repeated as champs in 2022, was already trying to warn his players about complacency. He was already trying to fight against that as Georgia tried to become the first ever team in modern college football to three-peat. Well, now there's no, making things up. At that point, right, if you win back-to-back national championships, you're in the middle of a 29-game winning streak. If you're Kirby Smart, you could tell your team, hey, no one respects you, don't overlook an opponent. But come on, realistically, if you were in that locker room and you were destroying every team you were playing, are you really going to believe your coach when he tells you, hey, you guys are not that good? You guys can be beat by anybody. It's human nature. Complacency sets in. But now I think Kirby gets his wish. Kind of like Nick Saban in a way. They're obviously from the same school. So it's not a surprise they're very similar. But now all of a sudden there's that edge back on Georgia that is not manufactured. They lost. Now you can come back hungrier. So Georgia is going to come back with vengeance. They are a guaranteed lock to be one of the 12 teams in the college football playoff next year. Joining them, the Ohio State Buckeyes. I hate to say it as a Penn State fan and a Penn State alum, but my God, this team, and this is the most talented team in the country. I don't see how anyone refutes that. You go in the portal. You get Will Howard from Kansas State, which, look, I'm not that high in Will Howard. I think he's solid. I don't think he's, great. That's not a home run transfer portal addition, but still solid nonetheless. A player that's played in a lot of games at Kansas State. You got a good experienced quarterback in Will Howard now running your offense. You add one of the best running backs in all of college football from Ole Miss, Quinshon Judkins, now to Travion Henderson, who is one of the best running backs in the country if he's healthy. Now that's a dynamic 1-2 punch in the backfield. You add one of just the overall best players in college football in Caleb Downs, who transferred from Alabama once Nick Saban retired, now to Ohio State. You have a loaded roster. Oh, yeah, by the way, defensively, they returned everybody. Half their defense was draft eligible and could have left early, and everyone decided to come back. This team, after losing to Michigan now 3 years in a row, is coming back motivated, and it feels like they're all kind of feels like Michigan 2 years ago when a lot of guys came back and they had one vision: to beat Ohio State and to win a national title. Michigan accomplished that. Ohio State's trying to replicate what the Wolverines did last year in doing so and having that come to fruition. But look, man, this you look at this, I don't see how Ohio State misses the playoff. And if they do, I think a lot of this Ryan Day discussion is stupid. The guy's one of the best coaches in college football. Okay, he couldn't beat Michigan 3 years in a row. He beats everybody else. And in one year where you couldn't beat Michigan, you still made the playoff, and you still were one made field goal away from winning a national championship. Outside of Alabama, no one pushed Georgia during that 29-game winning streak more than Ohio State did in that playoff game 2 years ago. Ryan Day's a damn good coach. But I'll say this. If he misses the playoff next year, he's fired. He should be fired. This team is loaded. Again, I think they're the most talented team in the country. There is no way they are not one of the 12 teams in the college football playoff next year. They are a lock. So we got 2 locks right now out of 4. When you look at the playoff next year, 4 college football playoff locks, no chance to miss the playoff. Georgia is 1. Ohio State is another. A third, Oregon. The Ducks are coming, man. The Ducks are coming. Dan Lanning right now is building an absolute monster. We'll go through the roster here in a second, but how I know this team is legit, don't have to name one player on the roster. It's a simple decision. It's a simple word. 2 letters, N-O. What he told Alabama. We can talk about reports and who was their, number 1 candidate. If I was Alabama, Dan Lanning would have been my first call. And I think he was. I think that's part of the reason why you had that Dan Lanning, if you want to call it, hype video announcing that he's staying at Oregon and not going to Alabama, even though it was kind of ambiguous. But Dan Lanning turned down Alabama in large part because he is building a monster right now in Eugene, and he realizes the situation he has in Eugene is better than the one he would inherit in Tuscaloosa. Look at what he's got. He's got Dylan Gabriel, an extremely experienced and talented quarterback coming in now from Oklahoma who's going to run his high-flying offense. You pulled in Evan Stewart, one of the biggest transfer portal wide receivers and one of the biggest recruits that A&M got in that historic recruiting class that Jimbo Fisher allegedly, quote-unquote, paid for a few years ago. One of the most highly coveted recruits in that record-breaking recruiting class was Evan Stewart. Now he's an Oregon Duck. Jabbar Muhammad, who was Washington's best defensive back on their run to the national championship game last year, he transferred to Oregon. Second team all Pac-12 last year. Offensive line is going to be great. Playmakers are plentiful. Even though they lost a few to the draft, they have replenished insanely well. This team is going nowhere. Going to the Big Ten, which seemingly is an increase in competition, they're going to have no problem whatsoever. It's them and Ohio State are 1 and 1A in the Big Ten. Everyone else is behind them. Oregon is legit. Oregon's going to be a big problem here moving forward. I love Dan Lanning's aggressiveness as a coach. They are here to stay. I can't see a situation next year in which they're not in the playoff. So Oregon, along with Ohio State and along with Georgia, is a lock. We are talking about locks for next year's college football playoff. 12 teams. I think right now there are only 4 teams as we sit here today. On Thursday, February 22nd. Only 4 teams you could say guaranteed to make the playoff. No way they are not in next year's run for the championship. Georgia, Ohio State, Oregon, and finally, the 4th and final lock for the college football playoff is the Texas Longhorns. I can't believe I'm saying this because I have admittedly been a massive Texas hater. They've earned the benefit of the doubt. What they did last year, Sark getting this team over the hump, going to Tuscaloosa and beating Alabama, winning the Big 12, getting to the college football playoff, almost beating Washington and going to the national title game. Texas, for the first time since the Colt McCoy days, they have earned the benefit of the doubt in terms of believing in them before the year. Quinn Ewers is coming back. And even though they are losing a lot of talent. Do not let that, they are not like Ohio State. They're not like Georgia and even to a sense Oregon where they're returning a lot of their starters from last year. They're losing 2 of their best defensive players, both on the defensive line, gone to the draft. They're losing their tight end. Could be a first-round tight end. Losing 2 of their best wide receivers. Losing their running back. Like, there's a lot of talent leaving Austin. But I'll give Sark a lot of credit. He has replenished this team really well, whether it's through recruiting, but also as well through the transfer portal. He's done a great job making this roster still a top-tier roster in college football. And now also he's brought the coaching along with it, where Texas, right, they've always recruited really well. They've never put it together for a long stretch since kind of the back end of Mac Brown's career. But now Sark has kind of matched great coaching with a great talent to the roster. And all of a sudden now you look at Texas. They, to me, are an absolute lock to make the playoff. Like if you look at right now a 12-team playoff, I think the worst record you could have and still make it is 10-2. I think 9-3, you're not making the playoff. And so you look at Texas' schedule now as they go to the SEC, it's very manageable. At Georgia, brutal game. Brutal game. But Red River versus Oklahoma, you're better than Oklahoma. You're at Michigan. Michigan lost a lot. I don't think they're going to be very good in terms of national title contention. They'll be, I think, around 9-3, 8-4, but not in the mix to win the Big Ten, not in the mix to make the playoff. And thank goodness this rivalry is coming back. One of the few good things that has come from conference realignment is the Texas A&M rivalry restored. Thanksgiving weekend in College Station. But that's a game that Texas should win. So you have a brutal game at Georgia. At Michigan, you should win. Red River versus Oklahoma, you should win. And A&M, you should win. Again, I think 10-2 is getting them in. So even if you drop one of those games, I think you're still comfortably in the college football playoff. Texas' schedule is not challenging outside of that. I think they are in. So when you look at the landscape right now of college football as we get set for the first ever 12-team college football playoff to commence, I think we have 4 locks. 2 from the SEC, 2 from the Big Ten that are guaranteed to make the playoff next year. Everything else is up for grabs. Ohio State and Oregon from the Big Ten, Texas and Georgia from the SEC.